The Steyr AUG is one of the newest guns added to Escape from Tarkov in patch point 13. It's something that people have wanted in the game for a really long time, but is it worth using? Is 5.56 even really that viable? And are there other guns in the 5.56 category that do a better job for cheaper? Well, let's find out. So the AUG is finally here. Like we said, it's something that people have been excited for. People have wanted in the game for a while, and now we finally have it. Another bullpup, which is kind of cool. The thing about 5.56 guns is that there are so many at this point that when we talk about if something is usable or not, we also kind of have to compare it, because the AUG might be fun or it might be usable, but how much money are you spending on it, and can you get better performance for cheaper? You've got things like the AK-101, the SCAR L, the 5.56 MDR, the G36, the M4, the HK. There's just so many at this point. The M4 is kind of the king, and it has been for a long time because of how modular it is. But when we're talking about is the AUG good, we kind of have to compare it. So I want to compare it to some of the other budget-friendly, very usable 5.56 guns that we have in the game and kind of see from there how viable it is. But we have to start off with price and availability. You can purchase the AUG at level 2 Peacekeeper for about 592 USD. It's about 70,000 rubles. You can also buy a different version from Peacekeeper 3, 714 USD, so quite a bit more expensive, and the only difference is this rail on top of this long kind of telescoped sight. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other way you can get it from the traders is actually Mechanic level 2 has a pretty good barter for it. So it's kind of the stock standard version with the long telescope sight. However, based on the market prices today, you can get these electronic components for 10 or 11,000 rubles. You can get spark plugs for 10 to 15,000 rubles. So all in, this thing comes in at about like, you know, maybe 50,000 rubles, 50 to 60, depending on when you, if you purchase these off the flea market, or if you find them, obviously that's going to be much cheaper. That's a pretty good way to do it. However, what's nice about the AUG is that you can actually also purchase this from the flea market, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. And you can get these for anywhere between 40 and 60,000 rubles. 5 minutes ago, they were 60,000 rubles. A bunch of people seem to have just listed them. You can get 100 out of 100 AUGs for as low as 45,000 rubles. So the value proposition there definitely helps over purchasing them from the traders. In my opinion, the problem comes in with this long little telescope sight here. As a bullpup, there's not really much you can do to the gun, which is kind of a blessing and kind of a curse. There's not many mods that you want to put on. That means that if you can get a gun for 40,000 rubles and just rip it and you're ready to go, there's not much extra investment. However, that means there's not much modularity and there's not a whole lot of opportunity to get the stats down low. So like we said, that telescope sight, in my opinion, is rough. I would basically never run that solo. With the one with the rail on top, you can throw like a red dot up there. That kind of helps, but then height over war gets kind of crazy. And the unfortunate thing is that this rail that allows you to take that sight off and then put whatever you want on is at Peacekeeper level 3. So it does require you to level up a little bit. I know Peacekeeper level 3 is definitely not easy. However, it's only 42 USD, so it doesn't add a ton to the price of the gun. And at this point, you can put whatever optic you want on it, whether that's like a Voodoo or a Razor, or if you want to go like red dot or something like that. Outside of that, really the only thing you can do is put on a suppressor. There is a longer barrel for the AUG. Most of the ones that you purchase are the longer barrel version. It does not make that much of a difference. 5.56 is pretty accurate. It doesn't affect the MOA too much. It does very slightly better on recoil, but very slightly. The best suppressor in the game and the long barrel only brought this from 52 to 50 vertical recoil, so it's not like it's worth spending a lot of money on. So basically you have the suppressor, whatever optic you want, and then whatever light you want. It comes with you know, the rail over here on the side, so you can put a light or a laser, and that's it. That is exactly how modular the AUG is. If we take a look at like the base AUG and take a look at some of the stats, the stats definitely start to get weird. In Escape from Tarkov, these numbers are basically meaningless. These numbers only mean anything when you can compare them to other things, and as we'll see in a little bit, you can't really compare them. You kind of just have to go off feeling. But to take a quick look, the AUG does have decent ergo, stock standard, 62 ergo, 63 vertical recoil, and 211 horizontal recoil. We're going to be planting on the horizontal recoil here in a minute. 715 rounds per minute as a fire rate, which is a really interesting one. Not very fast though, not too far away from like the AK-101 or the MDR where it's like 650. Like we said though, what's hard is that these numbers are pretty much meaningless. I've thrown a suppressor on this, which brought the recoil down quite a bit, down to like 52. Sacrificed some ergo with the suppressor and putting the red dot on there. but that's kind of it. So what I want to do is to be able to compare this gun, the AUG in full auto, to some of the other guns in this kind of range as far as price and availability, and kind of show you the difference and show you that these numbers aren't always kind of exactly what they seem to be. So the guns we have to compare here are the AUG, obviously exactly how we had it set up in the stash. We also have an AK-101 and the Steyr L. These are both very lightly modified compared to what can be done to these guns, and that is to get the stats as close as possible, not perfect, but as close as possible to the AUG. The AUG has the Thunder Beast suppressor on it. It doesn't really matter what suppressor, because the more important thing we're testing is at similar stats, how do these guns perform? So 52 vertical recoil. If I throw the suppressor over to the Steyr, got 55 vertical recoil, a little bit better horizontal. And if I throw the suppressor over to the AK-101, it's got 51, so 1 point better in the vertical, a little bit better horizontal, not great on the ergo. But once again, these stats are kind of meaningless, and it all kind of has to go based on feeling. So what we'll do is we'll throw it over to the AUG first, and you know, I'm just going to move D and A. I'm not going to move forwards or back to try and keep this as close to scientific as possible, although this is a very unscientific test. And the first test on all the guns is just going to be aiming right about here and then letting the natural recoil of the gun take it. I'm not going to adjust at all for my mouse. It's just going to be the gun. So as you can see, a lot of left and right there, a lot of up and down. That is kind of all over the place. So if I go ahead and just toss this over to the Steyr and just kind of move to the side a little bit, flip it to full auto, aim it around the same spot, and just let the Steyr take it. Climbs a tiny bit higher, but the horizontal spread is so much better than the AUG. Let's go ahead and throw this over on the AK-101. I'll move over just a little bit, swap to it, aim it around the same spot. As you can see here, definitely a little bit more horizontal spread than the Steyr, not as much vertical though. So the AUG seems to kind of have the worst of both worlds. It goes pretty high vertically, not quite as high as the Steyr, and it goes wider horizontally than the AK-101. So it kind of has the worst of both worlds there. There's a lot of other things that are involved in like these numbers, like camera recoil and a lot of stuff that the stats don't really show you. So what I want to do is again quickly switch back over to the AUG. We've got one more mag for each, and I'm just going to do my best to kind of like compensate for the recoil. This is obviously subjective based on how much time you have in the game, but just kind of show that same situation again. This time I will be compensating for recoil with my mouse. As you can see, it just climbs so fast that I was even trying to pull down, but it surprises you. It climbs so high, so fast. If I swap over to the Steyr, reload here, and try that again. It's insane how much better the Steyr is compared to the AUG. When we're talking about controllability and how high it goes, we can swap over to the AK and kind of do the same thing. So as you can see, even just holding my breath, I wasn't even crouched there, just holding my breath and trying to manage, you can see how much more controllable. The AK-101 has the biggest difference between the without trying to control and trying to control. The Steyr is still probably the tightest group, and the AUG is just really, really hard to control at full auto. So that's kind of like a super light comparison between some of the other 5.56 guns. So unfortunately, one of the things that test kind of tells us and it reinforces is that the stats on these guns don't mean a whole lot. They don't carry a whole lot of weight. The Steyr L with the suppressor on had less vertical recoil than the AUG, even though it climbs up a little bit higher. The variances are very small as far as the vertical recoil and the horizontal recoil respectively, and yet these guns performed very, very differently. Now the AUG has a little bit higher fire rate, so you think that could play a part in it, but the AK-1 and the Steyr have almost identical fire rates. I actually think they do. They're both 650 RPM, and these guns performed pretty differently. So in my opinion, these two both were much better and much easier to control than the AUG. So the next question is, well, how can you buy these, and are they incredibly more expensive than the AUG? And the answer is not really. To buy the Steyr from Peacekeeper is very expensive. I would never really recommend that, but because the rogues carry them, you can find them all over the flea market for, once again, 40 to 50,000 rubles. And because these guns are repairable now, you can get ones at 94, 93, 95, repair them up, and they're very, very usable. These don't really jam on me, although it's kind of completely RNG when they can, but you can repair them up to high durabilities, which makes them very usable. And the AK-101 is the same story. You can purchase this from mechanic level 3, which is hard to get, for 42,000 rubles. Same story though. You can go ahead and purchase this off the flea market for about 50 to 60,000 rubles. I've seen them as low as similarly priced, a little bit more expensive, but they're very, very fun to run, and they're a lot better than the AUG in my opinion. And importantly, another thing to bring up is, once again, these guns are very, very lightly modded compared to what you can do. For the AK, you do need this adapter, which you can't buy. I think it's a level 4 mechanic. However, once again, you can purchase it on the flea market for 2 to 7,000 rubles. Obviously, this person put it up really low, but you can buy them for really, really cheap on the flea market and then put the suppressor on. For both of these guns, there's 4, 5, 6 more attachments I could do to lower the recoil. This doesn't even have a handguard or a grip or anything like that. I can increase the ergo by replacing the pistol grip, which you can't do on an AUG because it's a bullpup. There are so many more things that can be done to these guns to make them perform much better than they do, and they already perform better than the AUG. So like we said at the beginning, I kind of have to compare it to some of the other guns in the class to show if something is worth it. I would say that once you level up the traders, I would probably never spend money purchasing an AUG when these other options exist. I would put it as much more usable than the G36, however, and just because it's not perfect or not the best value doesn't mean that you shouldn't use it. Early game, where we are right now, if I find one of these in a ground stash, I'm absolutely going to run it. I got all three of my shooter more than heaven kills on Shoreline with an AUG with like an L can slapped on it and a suppressor. It's a great gun for tapping, single tapping at kind of, a distance. And then if somebody runs up close, you just click full auto and you kind of spray them down. It's just that all of those things other guns do better. Because of the horizontal spray, even when you're trying to snipe with it, it's kind of weird to predict where the gun is going to go. And when people are close, the recoil of these other guns is going to be better. I didn't test the 5.56 MDR, but it's kind of a similar story. You can buy it on the flea market. It's a little bit more expensive than these other guns. And I would even put the 5.56 MDR as probably not quite as good as the 101 or the Scar L as well. So those are kind of my thoughts. I wanted to kind of include a little bit of everything here. I personally think 5.56 is actually in a really good spot, as they've been taking away some of these high tier ammos. M855 is very viable. I've killed a ton of people with it early wipe. As soon as you can get 5.6A1, that's going to be the next best ammo that's actually pretty acquirable from Peacekeeper. 5.56 is fun. There's a lot of options. Ultimately with the AUG is I just think that there are other guns that do the job better, similar to what I said about the G36. So if you haven't yet tried out an AUG, if you have and you don't like it, try an AK-101 or a Scar L, and I think that you won't be disappointed. So I hope that this helped and kind of answer some of your questions about the AUG. Thank you so much for checking out the video. If you like the video, think about dropping a like or commenting down below, or subscribing to the channel for more content like this. I stream Escape from Tarkov 6 days a week. All my links will be down below. And if you're looking for people to play Tarkov with, our Discord server is an awesome place to be. That link is down below as well. Thank you again for stopping by, and I will definitely see y'all on the next one.